Welcome. Okay, so let's begin by exploring the nature of our experience through the use of or the direction of attention. So let's start with these so-called outer objects. So you can just notice that you're able to observe objects and notice that I want you to just select something and look, do not look at it, look away from it so that you're aware of it, but you're not looking at it. And notice that you are aware of it, obviously, because that's part of the instruction, but just notice what that experience is so that you're not focused on it, but you're aware of it. And then bring your attention to it so that you're looking at it and notice the difference in that experience. So try that a couple of times. So look not directly at it, but so that you're aware of it, whatever the object is. And notice that experience. And then look directly at it and notice what's different. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to think about it. It's not a thinking exercise. So just if you think that the difference is one of thinking, then just set that aside. Don't just let the thoughts be. You don't need to give any attention to them. It's just an exercise in pure seeing. So you're just seeing and then you're directing the attention and noticing the difference. And this is not esoteric, it's fairly direct. It's very obvious what the difference is, right? The difference is that when you're not looking directly, then you're still aware, but you're not, your attention is elsewhere. Your focus is elsewhere. And then you can shift your focus at the object, and now you're still aware, but now you're aware of it in a focused way. So it's very simple. Okay, now let's close the eyes. And the purpose of closing the eyes is just to bring the attention more to the subtle experience so that we somewhat restrain the outward going tendencies. It's obviously only a limited restriction because even any focus on any object is still an outgoing tendency, but maybe a little bit less so with the eyes closed. And so now we start to maybe become aware of these subtle objects. So thoughts, sensations, feelings, mental images. And so you can choose one thing, one subtle object. So it can be any subtle object. It could be a thought, a mental image, a sensation, a feeling, whatever you like, one that you're able to actually bring attention to. So that will vary from person to person, time to time. So you just choose something that you presently are able to bring your attention to. And then we'll do the same exercise. So you can allow your focus to be slightly off of whatever that is. So if it's a particular sensation, for example, then you could just shift your attention to something that's not that. And that could be either a defocus, or it could just be shifting the focus to some other object, whichever you're able to do. For this exercise, it really doesn't matter, but you want to still be aware sort of peripherally of that thing, whatever that subtle object is, that sensation, thought, mental image, or so forth. And then bring the attention to the object of focus, the thought, sensation, image, or whatever it may be. And then repeat that a couple of times, just shifting the attention away, but so that you're still aware. And then back to the object. And you're just noticing the difference in the experience. So here too, it's a similar thing. You notice that you remain aware. Okay, so awareness is the constant, but the focus changes. It's just obvious. It's not again, it's not esoteric. It's very simple, plain, straightforward. You're just noticing that you're aware, and then within that awareness, the focus can change, and that change in focus produces various types of phenomena. And we don't really need to go into detail on what those are, but you just notice that it's different. There's something different about it qualitatively. Somehow something changes about that. Okay, so now there are a couple of things that can be an interference, with the this kind of inquiry. So let's just explore those and see if we can help to dissolve those just through a couple of exercises. So with the eyes still closed, I'm going to name parts of the body, and as I do, I'd like you to just bring your attention to that part of the body, to that part of your perception of your body, and allow yourself to let go of the low-hanging fruit there. And when I say low-hanging fruit, what I mean is whatever unnecessary effort, whatever unnecessary strain you find there, you just soften, release, let go. And I'll be moving fairly quickly. So the aim here is not for perfection. And really just the best experience will be if you just stay with the guidance. So don't linger on any one part trying to get it perfect. Just lightly, as I say the name, you bring your attention there, release whatever you can release. It's just the low-hanging fruit. And then when I name the next part, you move on. So here we go. left eye, right eye, left nostril, right nostril, left ear, the inside of the left ear, the outside of the left ear, the inside of the right ear, the outside of the right ear, the scalp, back of the head, the back of the neck, the tongue, the inside of the throat, the outside of the throat, the left shoulder, the left elbow, the left wrist, the left palm, the left fingers, the left shoulder blade, the right shoulder, the right elbow, the right wrist, the right palm, the right fingers, the right shoulder blade. The left side of the chest, the right side of the chest, and the space between the shoulder blades. Okay, so now we'll shift to a slightly different exercise. And what I'd like you to do is bring your awareness to the space in the mouth. Just become aware of that space. So you're aware of the space that is inside the mouth. So you can be aware of the upper portion of that space that's bound by the upper palate, and the lower bound of that space, which is formed by the tongue, and the front of that space, which is formed by the teeth and lips, and the back of that space, which is formed by the back of the throat. So you can be aware of that whole space and see if you can be aware of that entire space all at one time. Now, of course, I was giving the bounds of space, which is a little bit silly because space itself has no bounds. So you can start to become aware of that space in a boundless way, so that you start to notice that that space really extends in all directions uninterruptedly. But just slowly expand your awareness of that. So it might be too much to leap to the infinite, unbounded space, but you can be aware of the space that we were understanding as being bound by the dimensions of the mouth. So that's the primary focus. I want you to keep your primary attention there. But then bit by bit, you can allow your awareness of that space to expand. So you start to notice that that space extends Now, depending on the tendencies, you may find that you become very focused and engrossed by this perception of space, or you may find that there are lots of thoughts that seem to distract from that. And either is okay. It's just notice which is true for you. So if you find that you have lots of thoughts, just know that it does not have to be so. It's not a problem, but it doesn't have to be the case. And it's useful to know, just because it's useful to know that whatever experience you take for granted, or whatever experience you believe is just the way it is, it's not actually so. It doesn't have to be that way. It's just the way that you perceive it. And by allowing yourself to expand beyond that concept or that false limitation, you could actually just drop it, and you could find out that this space actually clears away and cleanses all of the other content. That's a possibility. So you could just allow that to happen. Or if not, you can at least just know that that's a possibility. Not because it's better, but just to know that that's a possibility. Just to know that you are not limited by those thoughts, that those thoughts are not anything that you need to be giving attention to. You're free to give attention to them, but you don't need to. It's not a requirement. And if you are aware of this space and you're noticing that you can really be absorbed by this perception of the space, then, and you become either thought-free, or at least thoughts quiet down, and you start to notice more space between the thoughts and around the thoughts, then you might start to just be curious and start to notice, do you have any ability to just remain silent? So you can just watch for thought. See if you can be aware of the subtle impulses of thought, and if you can just allow them to remain quiet, undisturbed. Not through strain or restraint, but just through a profound relaxation, so that you're just very aware, very relaxed. And then you might become aware of subtler and subtler forms of thought. You might start to notice how quickly the habit of reflecting comes about, how quickly referring to the past comes about, how quickly the naming and delineation of experience comes about, the assumptions of who I am, where I am, what all of this is. And you can just, through that awareness, you can just allow it all to become very spacious and relaxed. So it's completely without effort. It's just by allowing everything to remain undisturbed. So it's as if there's this lake and you're just allowing yourself to be aware of that smooth surface of the lake, and you're not disturbing it, you're not agitating it, you're just remaining very still in a very relaxed way. Now you can notice that as you allow for this deep relaxation, where the surface of the lake remains undisturbed, that you remain aware of yourself. So you know that you are, you know that this is, that you are the experiencer, you know that you are aware. So this doesn't require any thought, it's just obvious. You can be aware of this without needing to give rise to a thought. And it's necessary just to continue to be relaxed, because if you start looking for this self, then you start agitating the surface of the water and you start thinking, and the next thing you know, you're lost in thought again. But if you just remain very relaxed and still without disturbing anything, then you just, again, it's very natural and effortless. You don't have to make any effort. You just notice that you are. This doesn't require any kind of effort. It doesn't require any particular intelligence. This is uh, available to everybody because it's just self-evident that I am. This is my experience. I am experiencing. I am the one who is aware. So if you allow yourself just to remain still and relaxed, and you notice that you are, but you're not making any effort, you're not thinking, you're not straining in any way, then you're presented with something really quite fascinating. Because up until this moment, everything that you've been aware of was an object. So you were aware of gross level objects, you were aware of subtle objects, but as we allowed those to dissolve, we become very relaxed and still, then we remain aware, and we're aware of ourselves. We know that we are, but there's no focus on any object. There's nothing that we can say, this is what I am as an object. There's nothing that we can understand with the mind as ourselves, but we know that we are. So this is completely new. It's completely unlike every other experience, because every other experience is, I am aware of something. I am aware of something. So there's, I am the one who's aware. There's the thing at a distance, and there's some means of knowing. But here, there's just self-evident being that we cannot objectify. So now you have a couple of options. One is that you could just allow yourself to continue to relax and be absorbed in this undisturbed self. And you may notice that if you allow that, then your sense of that becomes enlivened, and it's quite enjoyable. So let's just allow that for a moment, and then we'll explore the other option. I'll just make a comment on this because it may not be clear to everybody. So as you allow for this to remain still and undisturbed, you will notice most likely certain hints of imagination. So you get these very subtle, a very subtle sense of a kind of, it's like a dream within a dream, a sense almost as if something is happening. And then the tendency is to follow that, to give rise to that. And these are the subtle impulses, very subtle seeds of thought, imagination, and so forth. And so they start to form these very subtle ripples on the surface of the lake, metaphorically. And the temptation may be to try and stop that, either to try and stop it if you're aware enough of that, or you just get sucked into it and you're off in a daydream. But either way, what's possible is just to be aware and then notice how that impulse gives rise to yet another impulse, and then another impulse that follows. And each one of these is a reaction to the previous one. It's a sense, if you're aware of this subtle ripple, then you maybe want to act in order to prevent that from rippling further, but that action creates a bigger ripple. And then you're disturbed by that, so you take yet another action. And this is all very subtle, but you just start to be witness to how that action then creates a greater disturbance. And then there's a reaction to that trying to fix that, and that creates a bigger ripple, and on and on and on, until the next thing you know, you're imagining all kinds of things and you're agitated and you have to get up and go try to fix things in your life. But through awareness, you can just notice, hey, there's that tendency, there's that habit, there's that impulse. And you can just watch the ripple, the subtle ripple, without reacting to it, without doing anything about it. And then your relationship with that changes, because as soon as you start to act on it or react to it, then you are imagining yourself at a distance from it. So now it's an object that you're aware of and you have a relationship to it. It means something about you. It can either hurt you or help you. But if you just remain still, then what happens is you start to realize that this ripple is a ripple within you. It is you. You're not separate from it. And as you just remain open to that, you start to experience that ripple as it's a ripple of pleasure. No need to do anything about it. Just experience that ripple of pleasure. And it is self-releasing. So nothing needs to be done about it. Its nature is to release. It's just like a ripple. If you have you throw a little pebble into the lake, then the ripples eventually, as they ripple out, they subside. So if we just allow that here, it's the same. It just eventually subsides, but we can experience that as a gentle pleasure. So that's one possibility. Now, another possibility is that we can let me just say a little bit more about that. Okay, so we can then start to think that, okay, I have to hold on to this state of this undisturbed state. So this requires that I continue to be still with my eyes closed and not give rise to any thought, which is useful maybe to a certain extent, but also can give rise to yet another delusion. So what we want is to start to be aware of this undisturbed nature as the primary reality, and all that is taking place, all that is experienced is just ripples on the surface of the lake. So we can start to be aware of all of the occurrences as being these ripples that we don't have any need to react to or try to interfere with, and that don't actually interfere with anything that about of our true nature. So you just notice again, if we just let everything just relax very deeply, then you can just notice that you're aware of yourself, even as there are no objects, no gross level objects and no subtle objects that you're giving any attention to. And you can notice that you're the truth of yourself, which remains even when all of those other objects are disappear. And they only disappear for a moment, and then new ones appear. So it's not about forcing anything to stop forever, but rather just noticing in that sense, in that temporary cessation, that you remain and you cannot see yourself in the way that you see objects. You can't focus on yourself in that same way. You can't touch yourself, taste yourself, hear yourself. None of these sensory methods work for what it is that's here when everything else disappears for a moment or dissolves for a moment. So you're aware of yourself. You know that you are here. You know that you are the experiencer. Again, this is just an obvious thing. It doesn't require any kind of convolution. You just know that you are. And it's so easy to overlook it until you really investigate and become aware of the awesome nature of this. And then it's impossible to overlook. So you just notice this self here, which cannot be seen, cannot be objectified, and yet it's beyond doubt. You know that you are. And that doesn't require any effort. And you can notice that this is very, very, very familiar. It's always here. And you can notice that this is actually the case regardless of how much relative disturbance or non-disturbance seems to be the case. And so now let's start to observe the subtle level objects. So we'll intentionally bring about some subtle level objects and allow for a momentary focus on that. So we're starting with awareness of this self, which is undisturbed, and then become aware of some subtle object, sensation, or a thought, or a mental image, and intentionally give attention to that. So whatever, if it's a thought, just intentionally think that thought. If it's a sensation, intentionally focus on the sensation. And then again, just let go and relax deeply. And just for a moment, be aware of this undisturbed self. And notice that the undisturbed self remains undisturbed, so it's still here. And do this a few times and be aware of what is happening so you can watch and see what exactly is happening. So how does this all work? So let's try it with a thought because it might be a little bit easier this way. So choose a thought, any thought, it doesn't matter. It could be, I don't understand, or I get it, or I'm bored, or I'm hungry, or whatever, anything. And just intentionally think that thought and be aware, give attention to that thought, but watch where the thought is coming from. And then watch what happens after the thought. Just after the thought, just relax, let go completely, and just watch. And now try it with a thought that if you haven't already, try it with a thought that you believe, typically one that maybe you find to be just a common kind of thought that you commonly believe, commonly think, commonly find to be somewhat disturbing, distressing, whatever that is. I don't have enough, I'm unlovable, whatever it is, whatever, I don't, whatever, whatever that thought might be for you. And just watch it, just watch what's actually happening. Notice if you begin with awareness of yourself, not as an object, but pure self. And then you intentionally think this thought, just watch what's happening. And then after the thought, let it go, do whatever it does, just be aware. And then again, notice this unblemished thought, unblemished self. So just do that a few times. And then next, we're going to, in just a moment, we're going to slowly open the eyes, and we're going to see what happens when we give attention to gross level objects. So start with awareness of the non-objective self. And then remaining aware of that, slowly begin to open the eyes. And with the eyes open, look at an object, maybe the same object as we started with. And just observe what happens. And if it helps you at all, you can, if you find it helpful, you can momentarily close the eyes again. If you don't find that that's necessary, then you can just keep the eyes open. But repeat that a few times so that you can focus on the object intentionally and then give that a rest. And again, just notice the non-objective self. So just notice what that experience is, how that occurs, what's going on. And it's fine if you can't give language to it. It's not about capturing this as a new understanding. It's just about observing, just noticing. So this doesn't require that you have some intellectual understanding that you can repeat. It's just the pure experience of it. Just notice, look at the object, focus on it, and then just allow the attention to go to the non-objective self so that you're aware of that non-objective self. And then see if you can be aware of if you can focus on the object and on the non-objective self at the same time. So that's all for today's formal exploration. For those who are here live, we'll stay on for the Q&A. So I'm going to end this recording. For those who are here live, just remember there's the Zoom announcement, so it can be a little bit jarring.